What's up, guys? Welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today I am carrying on talking about Case Histories in Neville Goddard's book Imagination Creates Your Reality. I hope you hit that like, subscribe button and the notification bell so that every time I release a video you can get notified. This is the Master Manifester. This is the teacher of the law of assumption. So I'll just be reading from the phone just to make things quick. I want to conclude this book. So this next story is about Mrs. J.K. Mrs. J.K. was living with her twin sister, and she was staying with her after she had been divorced. So Mrs. J.K. had three children, a son and daughter, and boy twins. Her sister and her husband had three boys. Needless to say, this was a crowded household. Mrs. J.K. was very desirous of getting married and living in her own home. She had been dating a man but decided that she did not wish to continue the relationship and broke it off. Many of her friends attempted to fix Mrs. J.K. up with eligible men they knew, but she was not interested in going on blind dates. So several of her friends commanded that if she wished to meet an eligible man, just a moment, she would need to get out and go places. The twins believed in the creative power of imagination, and they had a friend. So let me just check who these twins are. Oh, this is Mrs. J.K. and her sister, right? Okay. So they believed in the creative power of imagination, and they had a friend who also knew of the power of imagining. The three women decided that they would imagine a ring on Mrs. J.K.'s finger, which would imply that she was married. They did this for several weeks. During this time, Mrs. J.K. also imagined herself living in her own home. However, when she attempted to do so, she found herself imagining a home exactly like her sister's. So she was imagining the exact home as the one that she was currently staying in, which is her sister's house. One day, Mrs. J.K. received a call from a friend who asked her to come to her home and help her wallpaper her kitchen. So Mrs. J.K. agreed to help a friend who lived a few blocks away in the same tract of homes. While she was there, a male neighbor, just a moment, came to visit her friend. The friend introduced Mrs. J.K. to her neighbor. He later called Mrs. J.K. and they began to date. 5 months later, Mrs. J.K. married this man. The interesting part of this story is that all of these people lived in the same large tract of homes, which is this new person that Mrs. J.K. has met, and also of course Mrs. J.K. and her sister. Um, there were only four homes in the tract of 1,200. So there's 1,200 different homes, and only four of these homes had the same floor plan. Yes, this woman's husband owned one of the homes that had the same floor plan as Mrs. J.K.'s twin sister. Even though Mrs. J.K. imagined herself living in her own home, she had only been able to imagine herself living a house identical to her sister's. This is a story. Now, in that story, basically, the friends, they use the power of imagination, imagining Mrs. J.K. Sorry, the twin sister and Mrs. J.K. herself. They begin to imagine Mrs. J.K. Having a ring in her finger. And when Mrs. J.K. now was invited by the friend to come and put her wallpaper, she was introduced to a man who later became her husband. And in Mrs. J.K.'s imagination, all she could imagine whilst having this new home was the home, that the exact type of floor plan that she had, that she was living in, that her sister had. So in that place, the 1,200 homes and only four homes had that same floor plan, meaning that her imagination worked out exactly as she wanted. But she never knew this man before. She never knew that this man was going to marry her. And the man did, and the man also had the exact same floor plan as the house that Mrs. JK had imagined. So let me go on to I think this will be the last story before I conclude with the book. This is a story about the friend, Mrs. LM, who had introduced Mrs. JK to her new husband. During their friendship, Mrs. JK had tried to explain the principle of imagination to a friend, who was very doubtful that it would work. One day, Mrs. JK asked her friend to come to one of Neville's lectures. Mrs. LM agreed to attend, but was not at all convinced that in imagining she would what she wanted, she would get what. She agreed to attend, but was not at all convinced that imagining she had what she wanted would result in obtaining it. But she decided to imagine a very simple thing: the receipt of a handkerchief. She imagined that someone had given her one and then dropped the whole idea. Much to her surprise, she received a handkerchief in the mail from the mother of a friend who came to her house for lunch while she was in town for a visit. This woman sent Mrs. LM a handkerchief with a thank you note. Mrs. LM was not only surprised when she received the gift, she became something she she became something supernatural about it. Mrs. LM had attempted to disprove that imagination produces the thing desired. When she received the handkerchief, she had imagined, she interpreted it to be some sort of black magic and didn't want to know more about this teaching. I could relate hundreds of incidences involving dozens of people in which imagination was used to bring about the desired results. I have chosen just a few stories to illustrate that imagination can be used to solve all manner of problems and bring into experience your every heart's desire. I hope you have enjoyed reading this lecture by Neville Goddard. So, with that being said, guys, I just want to thank you for bearing with me, whoever's been watching my videos, and I hope that you've learned a lot. Moving forward, I shall see what I will talk about on the topic of the law of assumption. If there are any suggestions, anyone can drop them. With that being said, guys, I just want to thank you for your time. And also in this story, just to add of Mrs. LM, Mrs. JK having introduced Mrs. LM not believing in imagination, she just used a very simple example. This simple example that she used was just an imagination of receiving a handkerchief, and you know what? It worked. She couldn't believe it. So this, to me, gives me an idea to any viewer out there that if you don't believe in imagination, that it creates your reality, why don't you just try it? Try it maybe with something small and see if that thing will work. And when it does, then it will be proof to you that imagination does create reality. With that being said, I hope the people that have been watching my videos can begin to analyze what is actually happening in using your imagination to create reality, from states of consciousness, case histories, to the play, to inner conversations, to revision, to one course, how the law works. We just give thanks to Neville Goddard for the teachings that he has given the world, and also for the people that have been able to have an impact in the community of the law of assumption. With that being said, have a beautiful, beautiful day, and keep on imagining what you want, and it shall come into reality. Thank you.